Welcome to this lecture about how to make sure that your group works and all participants are happy. I believe you have all been here. Being part of a dysfunctional group, unable to agree on neither ends nor means, and loaded with conflicts, many of which do not even reach the surface. They just make you feel more and more demotivated to participate. Often communication is a problem. Sometimes you may feel totally outside, unseen and unheard, and sometimes the emotional climate is very aggressive, either openly or barely noticeably, but seemingly being the hidden driving force of everything happening in the group. And as a result, the group does not reach its goals and the members become more and more demotivated. This lecture provides you with tools for solving all kinds of group problems, mostly by preventing them from occurring in the first place, but also if you discover that problems do turn up in spite of your efforts to avoid them, the lecture also includes a tool to solve exactly that. The principles I will teach you now have been successful with teams and groups on all levels. I've been coaching management teams, leading therapy groups for people with psychological problems, and helping to initiate leaderless groups called self-aid groups or peer-to-peer groups. And the interesting thing is that these principles have proven successful to all of these categories. Unfortunately, I have not invented these principles by myself. I discovered them through the Danish women's liberation movements in the 70s. This movement used them as basic principles for what they call their basis groups. Most groups or teams in organizations are only focused on the outcome, the result of the teamwork. These principles differ in the sense that they balance the focus on result of the teamwork, the group's ability to reach its goals, and the well-being of the members during the group process. And in group focusing on handling the emotional effects of climate change and keep up motivated for continued climate action, they are very well suited. I will now go through all of this in detail, but here's an overview. What we're talking about here is a methodology with 4 simple steps. A starting round, setting up an agenda, implementation of the agenda, and a final round. First, some basic principles behind the method. There will be equal focus on the results of the group work and the process on the way. There will be set precise time frames. Participants will be trained in focusing on one issue at a time. And they will also be trained in taking lead in sharing thoughts and emotions instead of holding back, waiting for others to make first moves. The more you give, the more you receive. Openness invites openness. As mentioned before, we open with a starting round. When the meeting begins, one person is elected as being in charge of time. How long time we're talking about per person may vary according to how many participants there are in the group and what the duration is of the entire meeting. As an example, let us talk about a meeting of 2 hours duration and 8 participants. In a group like that, I suggest 3 minutes speaking time for each participant. No more, no less. The person in focus will from now on be labeled the protagonist. This means that the elected person stops the protagonist after 3 minutes. And if the person stops before 3 minutes, the other participants start as asking questions into what has already been said. The theme for starting round can vary from session to session. But when the group is getting together for the first time, a presentation is the natural way to start. Use the 3 minutes to tell everything you want about who you are and why you are joining this group. At later sessions, the natural theme for the starting round will be what you are concerned about related to the group's work, or your thoughts about the group or the work of the group since last meeting. The group may or may not have a pre-decided agenda for the meeting. But regardless of this, in order to show respect for the participants, it's important that everyone has the possibility to add items to the agenda during the starting round. That helps making participants feel seen and heard. This is especially important when participants introduce wishes centered around emotional issues related to climate change or to the group. I would personally advise you to give priority to these agenda items, and if needed, postpone some of the pre-planned agenda. You may wonder why we need a starting round. Actually, there's a number of reasons for that. Some people are not used to speak in public, mostly being silent because they feel insecure, and it can be especially difficult regarding personal and emotional issues. Being forced to speak about themselves is very good training for those people. And if nowhere else, you will very soon start looking forward to the meeting because you are seen, heard, and taken seriously. Other people are so used to be heard, often at the expense of others, getting their fair share of speaking time. These people need to learn listening in an empathic way. The structure and practice in the group will help developing this skill. Very soon, the structure of the meeting will provide security for the participants. They know they'll be seen and heard, and for many, much more than in their everyday life. As mentioned earlier, even if a prepared agenda has been made, items brought up by the participants during the starting round will have to go first. It may be limited issues, but at times it may be the entire situation or mental struggles of a single person. This kind of wishes for the meeting should be given highest priority. The higher the emotional charge, the higher priority. It may also happen that participants take on tasks, challenges, as homework from one meeting to the next. It will be natural to open up for the results of this, so that it can be part of the agenda as well. You probably know how confusing and demotivating it can be if multiple themes get mixed with each other. Therefore, it's important that the group establishes a discipline in this respect. Never forget who is the protagonist and deal with one problem from the protagonist at a time. In order to be result-oriented and reach your goals, it's important to end each problem, each issue with an action plan. Who does what and when. That will probably lead to homework for some members, and the result should be presented at the starting round of the next meeting. But what to do when the group encounters a problem? During my time as a specialist in group functionalities, I was often summoned as a so-called expert to solve the problem. You know what I did? I ordered the group to start a problem-focused round, because it is my sincere belief that the group itself is much better at diagnosing the problems and prescribing a cure than any specialist from the world outside of the group. During this round, the first step is to have the problem diagnosed, meaning everyone takes turns in sharing his or her view of the problem. All facets of the problem should be verbalized. The next step is to find a synthesis and a problem description that addresses everybody's view. A majority view is not sufficient. You really need to come to a synthesis. Once this description is agreed upon, the next challenge is to decide what to do in order to solve the problem. Typically, this should result in another round where everyone expresses their views on what the group needs to do and commit to contribute with their own individual part of the solution. In the beginning of this lecture, I mentioned that we end the meeting with a final round. Like the starting round, there are strict time limits and one person responsible for keeping them. In groups of up to 8 participants, I suggest 1 minute per person. In larger groups, you may need to limit it to 30 seconds in order to have appropriate space for dealing with the agenda. You spend this time by stating what you liked and what you did not like so much about today's meeting. Note that you shouldn't point fingers at people. Avoid playing the blaming game. Say we did, we were good at, we succeeded in, and so forth. And we were not so good at, we need to improve regarding this and that. By committing to help solving the problem, next time the group meets is an admittance of collective responsibility for all that happens in the group. This makes it easy to avoid an attack and defense climate in the group, and the feedback will be experienced as constructive. Again, you may ask, why do we need a final round? And again, there are a multitude of reasons. Good reasons, I would say. First, it's a very good learning arena when it comes to giving constructive feedback. And second, you are continuously learning about social and psychological processes. Third, you will be happy to hear your peers express positive thoughts and emotions about what you accomplish together. It strengthens the bonds between you. And possible dissatisfaction will not be stored for long, and thereby being much easier to handle. As a consequence, behavior which is detrimental to the group climate can be picked up and changed immediately instead of creating even more annoyance next time the group meets. And being heard and taken seriously is an important part of belonging to a group in the long run. Thank you for your attention. I can assure you that if you follow these principles, you will reach your goals and keep your members satisfied, even without an appointed leader. If you do not succeed, it is probably because you do not use the principles as described. So, take them seriously, use them, and good luck.